Hey, what's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. And today's a special episode. We have our student Ethan on with us, and we also have Ethan's mom, Carol. And it's the first time actually that we're actually interviewing the student and the parent at the same time. So I'm really excited about this one. But I'll let Ethan introduce himself real quick in a second here. But he just finished going through the summer 2023 recruiting process and was able to have a very good outcome. And then so I just want to get both Ethan and Carol on here and kind of talk about their experience of the program a little bit, and also just like talk about their experience and also how they thought about everything. So Ethan and Carol, thank you guys for taking the time. And Ethan, I guess we'll start with you. If you can just briefly introduce yourself so that our followers know kind of who you are.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Ethan. I am a sophomore finance major at a target school in the middle part of the United States. And so just went through the recruiting cycle and had a fortunate outcome. And I'm glad to be here speaking today.
Awesome, man. So Ethan, let's start from the beginning. I think you joined Wall Street Mastermind. It was sophomore year, right? It was probably like beginning of sophomore year, if I remember correctly. So up until that point, like how long had you known that you wanted to do investment banking?
Sure. Yeah. I really went through my freshman year trying to dabble in as many different things as I could. Had a lot of conversations with upperclassmen, picking their brain. And ultimately, what it came down to is gathered enough internship experiences to figure out what really, I guess, best put me forward into a potential career that I could want one day and the skills that aligned with it. So it just so happened to be investment banking.
Yeah. And so what were some of the things you were already doing prior to kind of joining our program? Like I assume you were already doing a lot of preparation on your own, right? And so can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So I got a taste of investment banking through an internship that I did. And as well as I interned at a hedge fund as well. And so being able to compare both experiences, I really got to figure out which one suited me the best, as well as the kind of work that I'd want to be doing moving on. And that's really how I compared and figured out what path was correct for me.
Yeah. And so that's really interesting because I think a lot of people on the outside looking in assume that most of the students that join our program are maybe like the really desperate, hopeless people that have no other choice and, can't get into investment banking on their own, right? I think that when you join and I looked at your profile, you go to a good school, right? It's like definitely target school, probably like for certain offices. And then like for New York, it's probably a semi-target school, right?
Right.
But it's like it's a good enough school. You have, like you said, good internship experiences on your resume already. So clearly you were getting some traction on your own. I think your GPA was quite good as well, right? And so you were doing a lot of things that you needed to be doing already, right? So when you were making the decision of like even joining something like Wall Street Mastermind, like what made you want to do that? Like what was your rationale, or like what made you want to talk to us and then also like eventually approach your mom and ask her for her support and you joining a program like this? Like, can you kind of talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned that the GPA was okay and had enough experiences, went to a well enough school. I think really what it came down to is I understood that the people I'd be competing against have very similar GPAs, come from a better background, if not, an equal background in terms of the school that I go to, as well as they're also going to have relevant internship experiences, right? It's not just anyone is going to be able to walk in and snag one of these internships. And understanding how competitive the field was, I really wanted to figure out ways I could be best prepared. And obviously I could draw upon the advice of students that just went through the recruiting cycle, but I also understand that these people that I'm drawing advice from are 20, 21, 22, right?
Sure.
And understanding that whatever questions I may have, they may not exactly have the best answer for. And
Mm.
so that's why I wanted to draw upon someone that has not only just helped, me or just a couple other people, like someone that would be an upperclassman would have, but I wanted to draw on someone that is a professional in this field and has some long-standing experience of what to advise students on, how you phrase certain things, how you go about networking.
Yeah.
Those are things that, to be quite honest, at my school, not every student that I know that ended up with these jobs on Wall Street networked extremely hard because they may not have needed to. And they had some fortunate luck and some opportunities that fell their way. And I understand that's not everyone's story. And
Mm.
so preparing myself the best I could was really all I could do. And that's why I sought out alternatives.
Got it. When you say like people had some fortunate luck and stuff like that, are you referring to, is that like people having really like built-in family connections or something, or like what are you referring to there?
Certainly. Yeah. So one of the students at my school, his dad is the head of North America for a well-regarded investment bank. And so any that student and any of his friends also will have a pretty good starting point, right?
Yeah.
And my parents do not have any background in finance whatsoever,
Sure.
and I understand many families don't as well. And I think a lot of the target schools in general will just have programs catered towards students interested in high finance, and those tend to be pretty heavily recruited for internally within a school, and sometimes it's very difficult to get, no matter how well you think that your answers may be behavioral wise or technical wise. And so I think this is what helped me prepare myself, and versus others that may have prepared differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I have some thoughts around that, but before I go there, I want to kind of come over to you, Carol, and get your point of view as the parent, because like usually when and pretty much almost every single student that we work with has to, after they talk to us, the next thing they'll do is they'll go talk to their parents and see if their parents will support them with them joining this program. And the ones who are fortunate enough where their parents are supportive usually will end up joining the program, and the ones where their parents aren't supportive or don't want them to join the program, then they won't, right? And so I've always been curious to kind of like, because I'm never in the room when that happens. So I'm always curious, like, what is that discussion like? And I'm sure it's different for everyone, but like also from the parents' point of view, like what was your reaction when Ethan came to you and asked you if he can join something like Wall Street Mastermind, which is like, to be completely fair, I think it's a relatively new thing, where like we kind of pioneered this model, at least for the investment banking recruiting industry. Like I think there are similar models in other industries, like college admissions and MBA admissions and stuff like that. But like for this, I think it's like pretty foreign for most parents. So like, how did you react when Ethan came to you for this?
Well, Ethan called us and then told us about your program. And then the first thing is my husband and I look at each other like, we never heard of such service. And then second, well, of course, Ethan trying to tell us what your service is about. And then the next thing we ask is how much it costs, of course. And then we look at each other like, do we really want to do this? And then we thought about it. We already spent the money sending him to out-of-state school, and what this few $1,000s would do to dent our finance. That's one thing. Another thing is we already have gone this far.
Right.
I wouldn't want to like just because pull my support back a little bit for this few $1,000s so he cannot go to the next step. That's one thing. And Ethan mentioned that my husband and I both are not in the finance field. So we have no connection in that world. And we felt like, and to be honest, Ethan asked us about the interview questions. We look at each other like, why do they need to ask all that? So we just felt like we really can't help him. And if we can have a service guide him and give him some sort of support that we cannot give him. And then to us, that's worth it.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. So basically, to kind of paraphrase what you said, obviously most parents out there can relate to this. You're investing a ton in your child's education already. I mean, this is probably only in the United States, but college tuition is extremely expensive. You're probably spending multiple six figures over 4 years. And the whole point of doing that, like you sending him out of state as opposed to keeping him in state, you could have saved a lot of money, but you did that because obviously you felt like that was an investment in his future and it'll hopefully help him, end up with a better career trajectory. And so this kind of just goes along with that in terms of like, is the same type of investment towards the same goal, but it's in the grand scheme of things, it's a very small incremental investment. And, if it works out, then you think it's well worth it, basically. I
totally think so. And, I'm glad it worked out. And I felt like it gave him a good chance to fight. And then that, for me, to me, that's totally worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that to Ethan's point, like also on campus, like sometimes there are certain clubs that maybe like I guess we call them like feeder clubs into these banks. And not everyone can get into those clubs because it's kind of crazy because those feeder clubs, they're kind of handpicking the people that they know are already going to get in anyway, because they want to keep the clubs prestigious and they want to keep their success rate high. And then like, it's kind of like a self-fulfilling, like a virtuous cycle where most of the alumni at these banks are from those clubs. And then they'll only help the people in those clubs, right? For the most part. And so like, if you're not in those clubs, then you don't have the same advantages. In fact, you're at a disadvantage, right? So then you kind of have to go and seek out other ways to level the playing field a little bit, right? Because sometimes I hear from people who say like, oh, well, if my son can't do this on his own, then he doesn't deserve to work in investment banking then, right? Like I'll hear statements like that. Like, I'm curious, like, how do you guys think about that? Because I understand where it's coming from, and there's some people like, there are a lot of, I think like things like this didn't exist back in the days, right? So like the people that are from an older generation, they probably had to do everything themselves, right? DIY everything. But times have kind of changed, and we're now in like a new generation where I think things only continue to get harder over time. Like you want to get into Ivy League school, it's a lot harder today than it was 20 years ago. You want to get a top job, it's a lot harder today than it was 20 years ago. Like, so like, how do you guys think about like getting outside help?
Yeah. You want me to answer that?
I'll say my piece first, and I'll let Ethan say his piece. I just felt like now it's not an age for DIY. A lot of things are not DIY, like doing your own tax return, doing DIY. You don't even know you're doing the right thing. And then, so certain things you have to give it to the expert, to give it to the professional. And then that's involved his future. And I'd rather not choose the route for DIY route, because that's take longer and might not work. And the chance of getting anywhere is very low. So, and time is the essence in our case. So my husband, almost as soon as Ethan said he wants to use your service, my husband is the first one. Hang out the phone, he immediately look at me and say, oh, we should just do it. I'm like, we don't even know what's going on. Yeah. So my husband and I both believe that, when it comes to many situations, we'll have to leave to the expert to deal with it. There are certain things that you're trying to figure out, it just take too long and you don't know what you're doing. Then you miss the chance. Okay.
Yeah, and I think there's 2 points that I want to make. I think the first one for a lot of kids out there that have to have that uncomfortable conversation with their parents about hey, can we spend this X amount of money on this program? And it's not even close to a guarantee if it works out or not, right? But it puts me in the best position. I think, for the parent that is hesitant, I would recommend that, they do some reflecting on the actions that their child has done in the past. So for my parents, it may seem like I've always had everything that I wanted, but, that was clearly not the case. My mom works long hours. My dad works very long hours. And growing up, they instilled those principles into me, and I saw them work every single day. And so, yes, I'm an out-of-state student. Yes, we pay out-of-state tuition, but it wasn't a 4-year vacation by any means. In fact, every single day that, I go to my college and I wake up, I understand that I'm there for a purpose, right? It's not just so I can, have a bunch of fun and then hopefully land a job on Wall Street without really trying. That's absolutely not how it works. And I would say, the second thing is, what's my opinion on using an outside service? Well, here's what I will say. There is a lot of legwork that needs to be done. I think Sam offers great foundational frameworks for how people should go about the recruiting process, how to reach out to someone, what exactly, what kind of questions you should ask and what you shouldn't ask. A lot of students are oblivious to that fact. In fact, I have close friends where they've asked questions and they'll tell me what they've said, and I'll be saying, was that really a good idea to ask that kind of question? That's a little bit standoffish, or that may be leading down the wrong path. But as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, you're just not going to know, right? You just have to accept that humility. And also with the fact that, keep in mind that of course, there will be the argument that, okay, well, if my child can't, do it on his own, then how can we expect an outside service to all of a sudden magically let it happen? Well, it's all about increasing your chance, right? There's a good chance that, you can have any outside service by any means, and it doesn't work out, right? Because where your advisor will not be in the interview room with you. They will not be holding your hand every single second. Every phone call you do take to network with someone, they'll not be saying, oh, hey, ask this next. They will never say that. They will never write an email for you. And, I like to say that, and I also like to think that 95% of the work really comes from the individual itself. But that 5% of what pushes you over the edge are the questions that, you can't ask your parents. Your professor won't respond to you right away, or your friend doesn't have the right answer, or they're hesitant on what answer they do give you. And I always felt like I could turn to someone within Wall Street Mastermind, post a quick question, and I could get feedback very quick and understand which direction I should take. Because, days turn into weeks, and then it's just really a couple of weeks where the recruiting cycle can just go by in a flash. I mean, I prepared for, probably like 6, 7, 8 months for this recruiting stuff, really just so it could go by within 3 to 4 weeks, right? That's not very long at all. There's a fast turnaround, and you have to be prepared.
Yeah, those are some really great points. I mean, I think that the bottom line is this, right? I think you bring up a really, really good point, Ethan, which is, I don't want both students and parents out there to get the wrong idea that, hey, if you just pay for Wall Street Mastermind now, like, we're just going to hand this job to you on a silver platter. Everything's going to be like done for you. That's not what this program is, right? Like you still have to do the actual work, Ethan, like, and work your butt off. Like, no one can go out and network with these bankers for you. No one can go out and pass the interviews on your behalf. That's all on you, right? But like, the analogy that I always use is kind of like, there's the athlete and then there's the coach. And as the coach, our job is to prepare you before the actual game, so that, we're doing the drills with you, we're running practice, we're creating we're like setting up the playbook for like, hey, here's the plays we want to run. And then, like, if you don't show up to practice, you don't, put in the reps, and you don't actually like step onto the court when it's game time and actually like show up and execute, then the coach is not going to be able to win the game for you. Right. But like, we don't ever say like, oh, if you're an athlete and you have a coach, then you don't deserve to be an athlete. Like, you don't deserve to win the game. Right. It's like, you think about the athletes that compete at the highest level. I mean, you're an amateur athlete playing the YMCA, like, you don't need a coach. But like, if you're competing for like the Olympics, like, you're going to have a coach, right? We're talking about Wall Street jobs that pay upwards of $200,000 to $300,000 right out of college. Like, that's the you're playing at you're competing at the highest level just within the finance profession. And so it's really not that different, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing, like my own perspective on this is like, look, services like ours exist for a reason, right? Like parents, I mean, not all parents do this, but a lot of parents do help their children in other ways, like SAT prep courses to get into better colleges, college admissions consultants to help them with their applications. Like this is kind of similar, like again, it's all going towards the same goal. And so if you've ever used any of those services, you kind of are already like, helping your child in this way. But if you haven't used these services, other people are using services like that, and they might just not tell you about it. And so you think that everyone's doing it on their own, right? And so my point is, the world is getting more competitive. It's only getting harder, not easier, and times are changing always. And like, someday I actually believe that a service like ours is then going to just become like, it's not even a competitive advantage anymore, because it's just something that everyone does, right? Like it kind of already is like that in places like China and so on and so forth. And so in the future, there will be something else, I'm sure. I don't know what that is, but that's kind of the world we live in, right? I think the other point that you mentioned about timing, which I think is also a really good point, Ethan, is that recruiting, there is like a recruiting timeline that happens super early, right? Because like you already got your offer, but you just finished your sophomore year, right? Yeah. And so I think most parents don't realize how early things happen. And I don't expect parents to understand this. I think most parents think like, hey, my son or my daughter should look for jobs when they're seniors in college, like right before they graduate. But investment banking has its own totally different thing, where they start recruiting people as early as sophomore year. And so a lot of times, by the time the students even realize their interest in investment banking, there's not a whole lot of time left. So there's not a lot of time for them to then go and like do a lot of trial and error and experiment and make mistakes and figure it out. Like you have like one opportunity to apply, network, interview for these jobs. And then like, if you screw that up, then you might not get another chance. Right. And so I think your point about knowing when to hire an expert and when to do it yourself, I think that's a pretty good framework too. It's just like for the really important stuff like taxes or careers or schools, like things that have a huge impact, you want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. You want to make sure you're doing it right the first time. Right. And then like,
because we can't waste.
Yeah. And for things that are more trivial, like if you have the time and the luxury to, take a bit longer or like make mistakes along the way, and it's not going to be hugely detrimental, then I think like, yeah, sure. Like maybe the trade-off is worth it to just do it on your own. Right. So I guess, Ethan, like one other question that I had for you too is, now that you're on the other side, right, and you spend some time prior to Walsh Mastermind doing stuff on your own, and then you were in the program, I guess it's been like 10 months. Well, you got the offer probably a month ago, but it was like 9 or 10 months before you finished recruiting, right? So like, walk us through kind of like those 9 or 10 months when you were in the program and the things you were doing versus like prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind, the things that you were doing on your own. Like, what's the difference? Because like, what are you doing in the program that you couldn't have just done on your own, I guess?
Yeah, I think I had a lot of questions about the recruiting process. As you mentioned, I had to start it early. And when I would draw on the advice of people that had just gone through the recruiting process, the year above me, I would ask you, when did you start reaching out to people? Some people started reaching out and started networking in September, and then they would say, okay, that worked for me. And then some people that reached out in October said, well, don't reach out in October. So all of a sudden you get these conflicting viewpoints, right? What I knew that I could do in the meantime is I could understand the concepts that I was going to get tested on and build that foundational knowledge pretty early. And I think the module videos were helpful from the point of reaffirming a concept or maybe helping reveal a part of a concept that I actually didn't focus on too heavily or just didn't know. So that's why, I think it was so helpful. And once I did get on the program and use the service, all of a sudden I had a much clearer picture of, okay, roughly around December or January is when I'll start reaching out to people. And then this is how I craft a cold email. This is how I find people to cold email, right? And it all of a sudden put things very black and white and offered structure in a time where things do happen very fast. And if you miss a month, well, hey, you might really see the effects months down the line, right? There isn't a month to waste. And to be quite honest, like sophomore year in general is probably the most stressful year if you're trying to pursue this career, because you have to worry about your sophomore summer and your junior summer within the same time period, right? And so in doing so, yes, do what you can to prepare yourself. But I mean, I wouldn't hesitate to, seek an outside advisor to help guide you and offer structure throughout the process, especially when, as you mentioned, it's not really any different than if you're a basketball player and you're having an outside coach, run clinics with you and run drills with you, right? I did that growing up. What I will say is when it comes to something like your career, you'll have 45 years of work laid ahead of you, right? Not try to maximize on the best opportunity that you can achieve while you have this chance, right? At 21, I may be able to get in investment banking, but let's say I didn't get in investment banking at age 23, understanding what I understand now, I wouldn't be able to get in at age 23. It would have been too late, and they don't want someone like me.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, which, I think that's the other thing that maybe is a bit of a foreign concept to parents, is that investment banking as an industry specifically, there's really only like 2 entry points. You either get in directly out of undergrad, or if you miss that, you have to pay a lot of money and go back to get an MBA, and you can recruit.
Correct.
You go to like maybe a top 10 or top 20 MBA. And those are like the only 2 ways, right? And so it's just like, you miss out on the opportunity, then it's kind of gone. But from what you're saying, though, it sounds like maybe the biggest benefit is just that as the student who's going through the recruiting process, you just have a lot on your plate. Like you're trying to maintain a high GPA. You got to take on leadership activities at school and clubs and things like that. You're doing internships on the side, and then you're networking with a bunch of bankers and learning how to interview and prepping your answers and behaviorals, technicals, and that's all on top of just like being a college student and having like the college experience, which you probably maybe didn't get to have much of, but
right.
but the point is like when you have all of that, when you have all of that in all these things you have to juggle, the 24 hours you have in a day, a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of students struggle with that, and it's like something has to give, right? Like your grades suffer, or you don't do well as well in recruiting, or like there's only so much time. And so by having like a clear framework and knowing like exactly, hey, this is what I need to do, this is how to do it, this is what order to do it in, and you don't have to do all the trial and error and experimentation. What it's doing is you're saving a lot of time so that you can be more productive with the 24 hours that you have in a day. And ultimately, I think like most people don't realize this, but like that's actually that's how you win the game, is if you're more productive than your competition and you're getting more done amount of time, then you're going to come across as a better candidate, right? Like if we really dumb it down to just like one sentence, like that's kind of what it comes to, right?
Absolutely. I can add something on that piece too about how early the timeline is. I think a great example is I have a pretty good friend. He's a senior, just graduated, and whole senior year he actually had a change of heart on his career track, and he wanted to get in investment banking. And there's been multiple times where he's been on phone calls and he will be explicitly told, hey, you're not the kind of candidate we're looking for, because we're looking for a sophomore somewhere within, the business major that has proven interest, right? So there isn't much time to have that trial and error. You're correct. I mean, every single day, sophomore year, right. It's not necessarily the most enjoyable time, but it is a finite amount of time where you'll have to be doing something like this. You have to play it long term, right? So yeah, you have to have a sense of urgency when you go about this. You can't just magically, have things just happen in place. For the Wharton kid, maybe that might work, but not everyone goes to Wharton, right? Not everyone has a dad that works in investment banking, or has a family member that has connections to Wall Street. Most don't, right? I'm just a regular guy.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess one last question for you, Ethan, because I think this is a question that a lot of people have too. Is like, well, something like Wall Street Mastermind. I mean, isn't this what like your career center at school is supposed to help you with? Like the career services, the counselors, that you have on campus, they're supposed to help you get these jobs, right?
Yeah.
Like, did you leverage that resource? And like, if so, like, how is it similar or different?
Yeah, I mean, first, you just take a look at the backgrounds of your career counselors, right? Like my career counselors never worked in finance in general, let alone investment banking, right? A lot of them were majors related to communications because they help students interview. But when you ask about the technical aspect, when you ask about reaching out to someone, or can you connect me to someone, or how about a timeline, to be honest, like they're not going to know very much. And my roommate, on the other hand, he is not doing investment banking, but he's doing a high finance related career. And sometimes career services just told him, very blatantly that they have no clue when a timeline is happening. They have no idea who to reach out to. We don't have alumni in that specific division within a bank, so we can't really help you. So here's what I will say. Even if you don't end up doing investment banking, you at least learn the principles of how to get a job and how to get a pretty dang good job. And it's not enough to just submit your resume, write a cover letter that might not even get read, and just fill out, some boxes on an online application and expect it to work out. To be honest, that's really just not how it works. Maybe that's how it worked back then, but nowadays, it's more difficult. I've had conversations with vice presidents, and even if you do make it to the interview stage and you make it to the final round, there will be five or so people that sit in a room that have spoken with you. And all it takes is, one person that thought that you weren't excellent or you weren't up to par, and you don't end up getting an offer, even if you kill the interview. It really is just, there's game of chance involved, and you try to maximize your chance, right? Like, why wouldn't you? Especially for a career that will stick with you. Your whole 40-year, working life, right?
Right.
Like, why wouldn't you try to optimize on something like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I think to your point, like the degree of difficulty that we're talking about is quite high, right? Because if you think about it, the average college grad in the US today is making around $55,000. Now, if you tell everyone like, hey, there's this other job that you can graduate and make 4 times that, like a lot of people are going to be interested, right? And so when a lot of people are interested, there are only a fixed number of jobs. That's what makes the acceptance rate very, very low, right? It's kind of like, hey, everyone wants to go to Harvard. So like Harvard has an acceptance rate of, I think, like 3 or 4%, right?
Yeah.
But like the top investment banks in the world, like the Goldman Sachs of the world, the acceptance rate is 1.5%. So it's like you take the Ivy League, the hardest colleges you can think of, and like cut the acceptance rate in half, or you double the degree of difficulty, and that's kind of what we're talking about, right? So the margin of error is super small, and you don't want to leave anything up to chance. You want to like have any competitive advantage you can have, basically, at the end of the day. So I guess with all that said, I realized like we forgot to tell everyone like what was the outcome of your recruiting process.
Yeah, I feel like I got my offer decently early, relative, because it was on the boutique timeline. But so I ended up getting an internship with a boutique in New York, and the other 2 offers that I was weighing at the time were non-boutique offers, or I guess industry boutiques per se, also in New York. And so,
yeah. And just for those people that are watching this that maybe aren't familiar with the terminology, especially the parents, I think
yeah,
like when we say boutiques,
sure.
we're talking about, there's a category of banks called elite boutiques, which are basically they do like some of the biggest deals out there, but they're not like a full service bank. They only focus on mergers and acquisitions, as opposed to, you know, doing both mergers and acquisitions and capital raising and IPOs and things like that, right? So like they're a little bit more specialized, but from like a prestige standpoint, from a compensation standpoint, actually from a compensation standpoint, boutiques are the highest paying, ironically. But from like a prestige standpoint and from like a like exit opportunity standpoint, which is something that a lot of people talk about, exit opportunities, and like what kind of job opportunities will you have after working at this place. From those standpoints, like elite boutiques are some of the best banks to work for, right? I just want to like clarify that for people, because like some people aren't gonna understand. It's like what
I have no clue.
Yeah.
I didn't even know. He never explained it to us.
Yeah.
No, he got into a bank.
We just
Yeah.
know he's going to New York. That's all we knew.
I just told them, you know, just be happy that I won't be coming back
Yeah.
from college, sleeping on the couch.
That
So
was
at least I have
yeah,
a job.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, when it comes to boutiques as well, you know, no job in investment banking is really easy to get, but, you know, I think boutiques, they just offer fewer spots, right? And as you've mentioned before, the ones that recruit earlier, the earlier you can get your offer, that's probably the best offer that you can get, you know, minus maybe a few of the bulge bracket banks that recruit, you know, a little bit later in the process, right? So maybe that offers a little bit more color in how that process kind of works.
Yeah, you're just saying in general, like the longer it's taking you to get the offer, the further downstream you're gonna have to go, and eventually you start scraping the bottom of the barrel because you're getting kind of like the leftovers, right? So
Yeah. Right.
yeah, no, that's a great point. Okay, that's awesome. I mean, obviously, look, it's a great achievement. Like again, like I said, the types of banks that we're talking about here accept like 1 to 2% of the candidates, right? So you had to beat out a ton of people, and like I know you worked super hard, and you should be super proud of yourself. And Carol, I'm sure you're super proud of Ethan, and just happy that he's not going to be, you know, coming back after college.
Well, actually, I want to say something from the parent perspective. I know nothing about finance. I already mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
And also, I'm a parent of 2 college students. Nobody want to get a phone call from me or my husband say, hey, you should do this, you should do that. They would never listen to us. So I highly recommend your service, all because you give them a structure, something that we cannot give. And then also your outsider can talk to them. They will listen to you better than listen to us. So I felt that already money worth spending. So
Yeah. I can be Ethan's career dad, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, he would never listen to me if I say, hey, you should do this. He would get all irritated. So it's better that coming from you.
Oh man, I didn't even think of that, but that's funny because I mean, my kid is only 2.5 and 9 months, and she already doesn't want to listen to me. So when you say that, I just laugh because it's I think that's just the way kids are wired, I guess. But anyway, this has been an amazing conversation, and you know, super helpful, and I'm sure also really insightful for you know, other students and parents that are following us. And so I want to thank you guys for taking so much time out of your day to share your experience. And then Ethan, obviously, huge congrats to you again on getting such an amazing outcome. And I mean, I always kind of expected that you would, but still, like, expectations are one thing, and actually going out and doing it is another thing, right? And so you actually went out and did it. And so so that's awesome. And yeah, congrats. And, you know, it was really, really fun working with you, and really easy working with you, quite honestly. And I always appreciate clients like you who just make my job easy, you know? So yeah, I can't wait to see, you know, all you accomplish this upcoming, well, I guess it's not this upcoming summer, but next summer, at your bank, which will be your junior summer. And then also beyond, right? And I guess the last thing is, you know, even though you're done with banking recruiting now, You're always part of the Wall Street Mastermind family. So, we have really, I think we built amazing networking community here, and just you're always a part of that, and continue to take advantage of that and the connections that you have from there. So,
Yeah, of course. Thank you. That's much appreciated.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. And all right, guys. If you guys are still watching this, thanks for taking the time. And we're gonna wrap it up here. And I'll be back with more of these interviews for you guys in the near future. All right, thanks.